I've always been a solo camper. Just me, a pack, and the sound of wind in the trees. That's how I recharge. But this trip, it was different. It was the first time I let someone come with me, my buddy Mason. We met through work. He was one of the newer guys on the dev team, a bit older than me, maybe 27 or 28, built like someone who played sports all through high school and never really stopped. Broad shoulders, outdoorsy vibe, easy laugh. The kind of guy everyone naturally liked. We weren't best friends, but we'd talk in the break room enough to find common ground. I mentioned I was heading out for a 3-day camping trip in the mountains near Hood River, and Mason, kind of on a whim, asked if he could tag along. Said he hadn't been camping in years and could use a break from screens and city noise. I hesitated at first. I liked my solo time, but something about the way he asked, kind of quiet, kind of like he needed it more than he was letting on, made me say yeah. Friday morning, he pulled up to my place early, coffee in hand, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, all ready to go. I had the gear covered, tent, stove, packs, and yeah, my oversized winter sleeping bag, the kind rated for way colder nights than we were expecting. He brought his old one, said it should still do the job. The drive out was chill, classic road trip vibes, indie playlists, dumb jokes, fast food. He asked a lot about the trail, about how I usually camped, and what I liked about being alone in the woods. I liked how curious he was without being overbearing. We laughed more in that car ride than we had in months of working in the same office. We parked the car at the trailhead around noon, shouldered our packs, and started the 3-mile hike into the forest. It wasn't too tough. Mason kept up just fine, even if he complained a little too dramatically about the weight of his pack. "Bro, you weren't kidding about packing light," he grumbled, adjusting the strap digging into his shoulder. "Pretty sure my spine's gonna file for divorce. Maybe you should have left the 6-pack at home." I shot back, nodding at the clinking bottles in the side pocket of his bag. "That's for morale, man. You'll thank me tonight." He wasn't wrong. When we finally reached the site, this quiet clearing by a cold, glassy little lake, I was already looking forward to those beers. The place was perfect, far from the main trails, ringed by tall pines, with just enough open sky to see stars later. We got the tent up fast. He wasn't totally clueless. He used to camp with his dad when he was younger, apparently. While I set up the fire ring, Mason waded into the lake up to his knees and came back shivering, cursing, and grinning like an idiot. "You're definitely doing that tomorrow," he said, plopping down beside the fire pit with a beer already cracked open. "Freezing your nuts off is part of the healing process." That night we grilled sausages, passed beers back and forth, and just talked. About work, sure, but also about stuff I didn't expect. Like how he hadn't taken a real break in years, how his last relationship ended badly, how he wasn't even sure why he felt so burned out lately. I listened, and it surprised me how easy it was to talk with him out here, away from everyone else. Eventually the fire burned low, and the cold set in. I handed him an extra fleece and told him to bundle up. The temperature was dropping quicker than either of us expected. He crawled into his bag first, already groaning. "This thing's so damn thin, I forgot how drafty these old ones get." I was still outside the tent, finishing up the last of the firewood stack, when I heard him call out, "Hey, you asleep?" "Nope." A pause. Then, quieter. "This is gonna sound weird, but can I crash in your bag?" I paused, with my hands still warm from the fire pit stones, crouched just outside the tent flap. For a second, I wondered if I'd heard him wrong, but then I saw the silhouette of his head poke out slightly through the mesh. "Seriously?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, even as my heart picked up speed. He let out a dry laugh, low and sheepish. "Yeah, this old thing isn't cutting it. I know it's tight in there, but I don't want to freeze." He didn't sound like he was joking. No smirk in his voice. No bro-y teasing like usual. Just cold, tired, and kind of vulnerable. "Yeah," I said after a beat. "Come in, there's room. Kind of." I unzipped the bag while he crawled over awkwardly, trying not to knock over the flashlight clipped to the tent pole. His shoulders brushed mine as he wiggled his way into the bag, and just like that, we were lying side by side in a space not really built for two guys over 6 feet. It was warm. Way warmer than I expected. Our legs tangled unintentionally as we shifted to get comfortable. Every time he moved, a part of him bumped against me, his thigh, his elbow, his shoulder. I tried to stay still, to focus on the soft rustling of the trees outside and the distant call of some bird settling in for the night, but all I could feel was him. His breathing was shallow at first, almost like he was trying to keep it quiet. Mine wasn't any better. I laid on my side facing away from him, trying to act normal, but there was nothing normal about this. We were close. Too close. And my brain was doing backflips, replaying every quiet laugh from earlier, every long look during dinner, every time his eyes lingered for a second too long while I was stoking the fire. After a few minutes, he exhaled hard and muttered, "Sorry, this is probably weird." "No," I said too quickly. "It's fine. I mean, you're cold. I get it." We laid in silence for a while longer. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, could smell the faint mix of smoke, sweat, and whatever shampoo he used. Something herbal, clean, familiar. Then I felt it, the subtle shift. His hand barely brushing against my forearm where it was tucked to my chest. At first, I thought it was accidental, just the way he turned in the cramped space. But it didn't move away. It stayed there. Just a soft, warm touch. I didn't breathe. Neither did he. We stayed frozen for what felt like a full minute, neither of us acknowledging it, neither of us pulling away. My skin burned under the contact. "You good?" he whispered, his voice right behind my neck, barely audible. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Another pause. Then his fingers, just barely, shifted, trailing along my forearm, slow, tentative. "Mason," I whispered. "Yeah?" he said, low. I didn't have anything to say after that. No joke, no follow-up. I just laid there, heart pounding, too aware of everything. How close his mouth was to my ear, how his chest moved when he breathed, how his fingers had stopped, but still rested lightly against me as if he was waiting for something. And I realized something in that silence. He wasn't trying to be funny. He wasn't just cold. He wanted to be there. And maybe so did I. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I was too aware of the space, how little of it there was between us. The way Mason had settled behind me, not quite spooning, but close enough that I could feel the heat from his body against my back. His hand never moved. It just stayed there, resting lightly, like he was afraid to do anything more. Or maybe he was hoping I'd do something first. I tried not to overthink it. I told myself he was probably half asleep, cold, maybe not even realizing how close he was. That it didn't mean anything. But I didn't move away either. And that meant something. Eventually, the sky outside started to lighten. I could hear birds, faint and far off, calling through the trees. My eyes were dry from staring into the dark for too long. I thought Mason had fallen asleep until he shifted behind me, slow and careful, like he didn't want to wake me. I felt his breath brush against the back of my neck. Then he whispered, "You awake?" I swallowed. "Yeah." A pause. "I didn't mean to make that weird," he said, voice rough from sleep. "You didn't," I said, too quickly. I shifted onto my back, careful not to jolt the bag too much. He was watching me, his eyes still sleepy but clear. "It's fine." He studied me for a second, like he was trying to read something in my face. Then his gaze dropped to where our arms were almost touching again. "You sure?" he asked, quieter this time. "Because, I don't know, last night felt kind of, I don't know." He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. So did I. It felt like crossing a line without ever moving. I could have brushed it off, made a joke, changed the subject. But I didn't want to. Something had shifted, and pretending it hadn't would have felt like lying. So I just said, "Yeah, it did." Mason looked down again, jaw tightening slightly. I didn't plan it or anything. Being that close to someone again, I guess. It felt safe. I don't know. I nodded, understanding more than I expected to. "Yeah, I get that." For a while, we just laid there, both of us half in the sleeping bag, half tangled, with this weird morning stillness around us. Not awkward, exactly. Just new. Then he chuckled softly. "What?" I asked. He looked at me, a little sheepish. "This is definitely the weirdest camping trip I've ever been on." "Yeah?" I said, smirking. What gave it away? The awkward shared sleeping bag or the accidental cuddling? "Definitely the cuddling," he said, laughing under his breath. "That's not usually part of the plan." We both went quiet again, but this time the silence felt easier, less tense. And somewhere in that moment, he reached over again, not with hesitation this time, but just enough confidence to let our hands touch fully, palm to palm, fingers brushing slightly. It was small, barely anything, but it felt huge. Outside, the world was waking up. Inside the tent, everything had changed, and I didn't know what came next, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. We finally crawled out of the tent around 7:30. The forest was still soaked in morning fog, and everything felt quieter than usual, like the world was holding its breath. Mason stretched first, arms up, shirt lifting just enough to show a line of skin above his waistband. I looked away too fast, suddenly aware of how little space had been between us for the past 8 hours. "I'll get the fire going," I said, needing something to do. "Cool," he replied, already unpacking the instant coffee from our food stash like nothing unusual had happened. Except everything had. And he knew it too. We didn't talk about the sleeping bag, or the way his hand had stayed in mine just a second too long after we woke up. Instead, we fell into a rhythm. Coffee, oatmeal, breaking down gear like we were just two friends who'd camped together a dozen times before. But the silence between us had a new texture. It wasn't the comfortable quiet from yesterday, it had weight now, edges. Every now and then I'd glance up and catch him watching me. Quick looks, never lingering, but it wasn't the same kind of casual observation. It was like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. After breakfast, we hiked down to the lake again. He skipped rocks while I took a few photos, trying to ignore the weird flutter in my chest every time he stepped too close or brushed past me on the trail. By noon, we were back at the trailhead, packing the car. The drive home was quiet, but not awkward, just thoughtful. Like neither of us wanted to say the wrong thing and ruin whatever it was we were suddenly in the middle of. About halfway back, with the radio playing low and the windows cracked open, Mason finally spoke. "So, we just not gonna talk about last night?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I was waiting for you to bring it up." He nodded slowly. "I figured. You're quieter than me." I snorted softly. "And you're terrible at pretending things didn't happen." He grinned a little, then looked out the window. "Look, I don't want to make anything weird between us. I'm not trying to be a jerk or play with your head. That's not me." "I know," I said quickly, meaning it. He turned back toward me, one hand resting loosely on his knee. It just felt good, being close to someone. Especially you. I didn't plan on it. I didn't even know I wanted that. But it felt right. I nodded, keeping my grip on the wheel steady, even though my heart was doing its own thing entirely. "It felt right to me too," I said quietly. He didn't say anything right away, just let out a slow breath and leaned his head back against the seat. "I've never really explored that side of myself," he admitted. "I've always been the guy who dated girls, did the expected thing. I don't even know what this means." "You don't have to label it," I said. "Not right now. Not ever if you don't want to." He looked over at me again, and something about his expression, less guarded, more open, told me this wasn't a fluke. Not for him, not for me. When we finally pulled into my driveway, I didn't move to get out right away. Neither did he. "So what now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I said, honest. "But if you want to figure it out together, I'm open to that." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded, slow and deliberate. "Yeah," he said. "I think I want that." Monday at the office felt like stepping into a completely different universe. The harsh fluorescent lights, the sound of keyboards, the low hum of emails buzzing into inboxes, it all felt disconnected from what had happened in the woods. Mason and I barely spoke that morning. Not in a cold way, just cautious. He gave me a quiet, "Hey," at the coffee machine, and I nodded back. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, like we were sharing a secret nobody else in the building would ever understand. The day dragged. Meetings, Slack pings, lunch eaten at my desk. I kept replaying everything, his fingers against mine, his voice in the dark, the way he'd looked at me on the drive home when he said he wanted to figure things out together. Part of me wanted to corner him in the stairwell and ask if he still meant it. Another part of me was terrified he'd pretend it hadn't happened. But then, around 3 p.m., he sent a message. "Mason, you doing anything after work?" I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary before typing back. "Me, not really." "You?" "Mason, wanna grab dinner?" "Me, yeah, sure." He suggested a little Mexican place a few blocks from the office. We walked there together, side by side, not touching. But our steps stayed in rhythm the whole way. We sat in a booth, ordered tacos and beers, and didn't dive into anything heavy right away. We joked about the guy in accounting who always wore sandals, complained about a broken printer on our floor. Just normal stuff. Familiar. But after the second round of beers, the conversation shifted. "So," Mason said, his tone softer, "I thought I'd feel different today. Like maybe it would all hit me and I'd freak out or something." "And?" I asked. He shrugged, smiling faintly. "I didn't." I waited. "I've been thinking about it," he continued, picking at the edge of a tortilla chip. "What it meant. And I don't have an answer. But I know it wasn't just the cold, or a one-time thing." My heart thudded, slow and steady. "Okay," I said. He looked up at me. "You don't think that's weird, that I'm still figuring this out?" "No," I said. "I think it's honest." He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for that answer all day. We didn't talk about labels. We didn't talk about next steps. But when the check came, he paid without saying anything, and when we walked back to the lot, he lingered by my car. "You coming over?" he asked, almost too casually. "Sure," I said. We didn't sleep in the same bed that night, but we did sit on his couch for hours, knees touching, talking about everything and nothing like we were rebuilding something brick by brick. And just before I left, he pulled me into a hug, not rushed, not platonic, and held on a few seconds longer than necessary. "I'm glad it was you," he murmured. That stuck with me all the way home. The next few weeks felt like walking a tightrope, but not in a bad way. Mason didn't pull away, but he didn't exactly rush toward anything either. We kept hanging out. Sometimes at my place, sometimes at his. Always casual, always just us. But the space between us kept shrinking. One Friday night, he invited me over to help him build a bookshelf he ordered online. Typical IKEA chaos, too many screws, barely readable instructions, and a lot of swearing. We ended up on the floor, halfway through step 6 of 34, laughing like idiots. Somewhere between dropping a board on my foot and realizing we'd installed a shelf upside down, we both stopped. I was sitting cross-legged, holding a piece of the side panel. He was kneeling across from me, one hand on the floor, the other resting on his thigh. He was just looking at me, calm, steady. And then he leaned forward. No big dramatic moment, no surge of music, just a quiet lean, like he was testing gravity. And I met him halfway. The kiss wasn't intense, it wasn't rushed or messy. It was tentative, warm, a little awkward, like we were both discovering something neither of us had really allowed ourselves to want out loud. When we pulled apart, he didn't look away. "I've been thinking about that since the tent," he said. "Same," I replied. He smiled. Nervous, but real. "So this is a thing?" "Feels like a thing." After that night, things didn't explode into something dramatic. There weren't any declarations or overnight changes. What did change was the way he'd touch my arm when he passed me the remote. The way he'd sit closer on the couch without pretending it was an accident. The way I stopped second-guessing every glance he gave me. One night we watched a horror movie, something with a ridiculous amount of jump scares, and Mason, pretending he wasn't scared, kept inching closer every time something loud happened. By the end of the movie, he was halfway in my lap, That was a dumb movie, he said, not moving away. Totally, I said, arms loosely around him. We stayed like that for the rest of the night. Still, there were moments of hesitation. I caught him staring off sometimes, like he was trying to piece together a new version of himself he hadn't fully figured out yet. But he never shut me out, and he never stopped showing up. One night, as we sat on his balcony with beers in hand, Mason said something I didn't expect. I used to think I had it all figured out, he said, looking up at the stars. Like, life was just this checklist. Job, girlfriend, house, whatever. And now? I asked. He glanced at me, his expression soft. Now I'm okay not knowing, as long as you're in the picture. I didn't say anything right away. I just leaned in and kissed him again, slower this time, and I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. It was Mason's idea to go camping again. 6 weeks after that first trip, after all the weird pauses and new beginnings, he texted me out of nowhere. Mason, wanna go back? Just like that. I didn't need to ask what he meant. Same spot, same trail, same silence between the trees. The weather was warmer this time. No need for oversized sleeping bags, but I packed mine anyway, just in case. The hike in was easier, like our bodies remembered it, like the trail welcomed us back. We didn't talk much as we walked, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just that kind of quiet where you're both present, no need to fill the space. When we reached the lake, Mason dropped his pack and walked straight to the edge. He looked out over the water like he had something to say, but hadn't decided how to say it yet. I joined him, stood shoulder to shoulder, waited. Finally, he spoke. You know I had no idea what I was doing that night, right? I nodded. I figured. I wasn't trying to test you, or mess with your head. I know. He looked down at the ground, then up at me. I felt safe. That's the only word I can think of. Lying next to you in that tent. It was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I had to be anything for anyone. My throat tightened a little. I didn't say anything at the time, I told him. But when you asked to get in my bag, I think that was the first time I let myself hope something could actually happen. Not just with you, with anyone. He turned to me then, something soft flickering behind his eyes. We didn't kiss right there. We didn't need to. That night, we didn't even zip up the tent. We left it half open to watch the stars. And yeah, we shared the sleeping bag again. But this time, he didn't wait until the middle of the night to reach for me. He curled into my side early, his head on my shoulder, his fingers brushing my chest like it was second nature, like we'd always done it this way. Still the weirdest camping trip I've ever had, he murmured into the dark. Still cold? I asked. He shook his head, pressing closer. Nope, not even a little. We lay there in silence, just listening to the wind in the trees and the faint rippling of the lake. And I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Not dramatic, not flashy, just two people in a tent, sharing the same sleeping bag. And finally, everything else too.